Greetings and welcome. My name is Jake Rayson. I am a forest gardener and a forest garden designer. And every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, I'm doing a live stream. It started out last March in the first lockdown here in the UK, and I kept it going for right the way through to September. So best part of 9 months. I had a break in January. And I had a break mostly because of work. I had my first landscaping job. So that's what I'm talking about today, is forest garden landscaping. For those people on there's a Telegram group and a WhatsApp group. I'm trying to move everyone over to Telegram slowly. But I've been sharing some photographs with a group. So you might well have seen these photographs before. But I really wanted to talk about how simple in practice the idea of forest garden landscaping is, and I'll show you. This is what the slideshow is about. I will show you. There is nothing fancy. There's no magic involved. It's anybody can do this. And really big thank you to Lynn as well, who's on the forest garden group, for the idea of a mulching bed which extends underneath a tree. You never have grass underneath the tree because when it's young, because it will compete with the tree in terms of nutrients and water. So always mulch under a tree. And Lynn said, well, just expand that bed and have a really, really big bed, and then it's a mulching bed, but it's also you can plant other things in there as well, and that's exactly what I've done. So I'll show you that later as well. So a big thank you to everybody on the group for all the ideas and discussions and different plants and everything. It really is a joint effort. I think that forest gardening epitomises working with nature and working with other people. There's not really any room for ego. So the more forest gardeners, the merrier, and the more forest garden designers and the more forest garden landscapers. It is not competition. It is what is required. We need more people doing this throughout gardening and throughout landscaping and throughout agriculture, and a total shift and change in the way that society functions. And that's not too much to ask now, is it? Anyway, on with the show. This is a photograph. I'm going to try. Oh yes, it does work. This is a photograph. The other day we had a load of snow in West Wales about a week ago. I was supposed to be planting out the hedgerow in this photograph here. This is property number 10, and as you can see, it's a bit tricky to do that. So it's a 10. The ecahomes project is out here in West Wales. I won't be specific about where it is. Because I won't. But it's a site with 3 phases to it. The first phase is I can show you on the CAD. The first phase is the social housing. So let me just bring up. Are you gonna work? Oh, it's a bit slow. Yeah, I forgot. I need a new computer. Don't I? So I'm not sure if you can see that. Let me just zoom out nice and slowly. So it's on the edge, on the west end of of a local village, and the first part of the project is social housing, and this is being brought up by a housing association. So there are 5 buildings, which is 10 properties. Hopefully you can see this. Along the bottom, there's 3 buildings which are flats. This is to make access easier. And then there's 2 buildings on the top, on the north side, and they are 4 semi-detached properties. And each property has a front garden and a back garden. The next stage of the development is 5 private houses over here. So they're bigger houses, but they are smaller gardens. So it's kind of very interesting. That's phase 2. And then the third phase is this space over here. It's about an acre, and it's a sloping. It's a slope. It slopes from west to east, and it's an old field. And the idea is to have an allotment orchard, forest garden, children's play area. So it would be absolutely amazing to have as a community forest garden, incorporating all those elements. So I'm just really, really excited about that. That's not going to happen for, that's not going to happen for I guess for a couple of years. But that is brilliant. But it does tie in. It really does tie in with the aspects of landscaping, and the thing that I think is most important is a thing that I've left till last and has no pictures with it, and that's all about the community. It's about the people and how the people are interacting with the land and their gardens and the space around them. And I actually do believe that this is the most exciting and interesting and most important aspect of it, and it's integrating two of them together. Not everyone's into gardening, but everybody likes being outside and likes trees. So that's really, really important. Is a development of the community, development of the people with their space. So I'll come on to that in a second. I'm just going to get rid of the satellite. So first of all, let's go have a quick look at the outline. Oops, come on. Yep, we're going to have a look at the outline of the chat today. Already, I've spoken for 10 minutes. I will check in on questions. I'll save the questions for the end, just so I don't really interrupt the flow. So you've got an idea from the plan. One thing I do find as well, if you ever get into doing forest garden design, the design side of it is, I actually start to think in 2 dimensions and from a plan view. It's actually very difficult for people who aren't, if you're not used to doing that, it can be very difficult to visualize how a garden will look and what the space is like. But just bear in mind, 4 properties to the north, 6 properties to the south, with a road running from east to west, and there's a slope which is running from west to east, so it's the running downhill. And the characteristics of a forest garden, like the definition of a forest garden, it's exactly what you use when you're doing the landscaping. There isn't any difference to it. It's exactly the same principles. It's just because of the lack of money, really, more than anything else. Because of the lack of, there's not much money to play with. I think with the landscaping, the other houses which have been done by the developer really just do have lawn and hedge and a tree, and that's it. So what I was told for the beginning of the project was to have 1 fruit tree, 1 climber, lawn, hedge, front hedge. That's it, and no specification about what it should be, or wildlife, or being productive. So I've just taken the ideas of forest gardening and applied it to that very, very simple structure. I had to put lawn in. I'm not a big fan of lawn. Lawn's good. It has its place. Grass is a good, grass is a plant, and it does have its place. But I think that place has to be, it doesn't have to be such a big space for that. Its place could be smaller, So the characteristics that I'm looking at is what we're aiming at is an edible ecosystem. So there's 2 things that we're doing. Firstly, we're actually creating a productive space, and secondly, we're creating a space for wildlife as well. So an edible ecosystem. This is the 2 words, edible ecosystem, for me really sum up what a forest garden is about. So it has to be sustainable, and it's sustainable in that there's very little maintenance involved in it. Oops, come here. It's sustainable in that there's very little maintenance involved in it. It's productive because there's fruit trees and fruit bushes. It's wildlife friendly because you have a permanent ground cover and you have trees, and you're planting in layers. So there's ground cover, shrubs and trees. Those are the kind of 3 basic layers. You can have loads in between, and it's perennial. One of the characteristics of a forest garden is that it's mostly using perennial plants. You can use annuals in various places, whether that's native wildflowers or whether that's annual vegetables. But the idea, the majority is to use perennial plants where possible. And for the wildlife friendly, what I'm really interested in is this crossover. So there's the there's the whole idea of the forest garden as a productive space, and you're working with nature, and it's also a wildlife space as well. So use natives where you can, and there's plenty of opportunities to use native plants in a forest garden, and use natives where use natives where you can, and also the ornamental aspect as well, how people relate to the garden. I think that's where they're really important with basic design elements and moving things around so they feel right and they work in a particular space, but do not ignore the ornamental aspect of it. And again, that's where native wildflowers can come in so useful. So with this particular project, I have really tried to explore different options in terms of native plants, and not just using standard forest garden ground cover, but using native ground cover as well. So I've used, for example, Germander speedwell and yellow pimpernel and yellow I used the Lamiacea, what's it called, like a yellow dead nettle, so I can't remember its name. Name escapes me. But I've tried out a variety of different native ground covers, so not just relying upon the ones which are in all the books about forest gardens, so using native ground covers. And likewise for the hedges, with the windbreak hedges, I've used a couple of natives. I have used a non-native in one situation, but that's for a particular reason. So wildlife friendly, using native plants. There's plenty of opportunities to use wildlife. And now what I really think forest gardening is the potential of forest gardening is that it brings together the productive, the wildlife and the ornamental into one space, and I think this is really, really exciting. I've got lots of other projects on the go at the moment. One of the big ones is I'm making a grant application to take photographs of wildflowers, of UK native wildflowers, and then using them in an ornamental situation. I think this is really, really important because it ties in perfectly with the forest garden. This is my particular thing as a garden designer. I think this is the way to go, and I think it will pull everything together. So that's what I want to do. But yes, you can see the characteristics of a forest garden can fit in any kind of situation. It's an edible ecosystem. Okay, so I love this. I absolutely love this is sedum. Oh, can't remember what it's called. It's changed its name now. Sedum's changed its name to something begin with a H. I can't remember, but this is a sedum spectabile. I think this is. I'm fairly sure this is a native sedum. Not 100% sure. It's one we've got at home, and just a beautiful flower, and it's an edible leaves in salads, and it's a fantastic pollinator flower as well. Pollinator, yeah, it's a fantastic flower for pollinators, as you can see with a honeybee and a bumblebee on it. So yeah, brilliant. Just more of this, please. So the plan. So I just showed you the plan, and I'm just going to very quickly go over the plan again, and I'll zoom in. Where shall I zoom into? So the plan is very, very simple. I'll just take this one example here. Just the front garden, the front garden of property number 10. The plan is really, really simple. At the front of the property, there is it's council land. I didn't realise until the other day it's an adopted road, and this is for services. So there's a space of about 1.2 metres, I think it is, at the front of the property, and that space is so that there's some pipes running underneath. So I've actually put green strawberry in there as a ground cover, but there's just ground cover. There's nothing else. I am putting incidental plants in. I am putting clumps of things like meadowsweet and foxglove and the plant whose name I can't remember. Not yellow snapdragon. Totally forgotten it. It's like a dead nettle. It's like a yellow dead nettle. And I can't remember any of the names of it. And the idea is here. It's accessible. You can dig it up. You can take the cables out. But it's a kind of an area which is there's lots going on in terms of plants, but you can still kind of get into it. And the key thing, what I think is absolutely fantastic, is as soon as you start to do this, as soon as you have an area, you say, okay, this is going to be oregano or green strawberry or whatever the ground cover is, and it's thick. It's a thick ground cover, and there is really little maintenance. That once the ground cover is established, there's such little maintenance involved in it. You can then start to plant other plants in. So I'm putting in stuff like foxgloves and meadow sweet and sweet Sicily and things like that. But just here and there, more for the ornamental aspect. But other people, you can put perennial vegetables in there. You can put I don't know, good King Henry or depending on how high the ground cover is, alliums or something. So it's an opportunity. Every single bed which is covered with a ground cover is an opportunity to plant other things as well. And I really want to push that. When I come to the community aspect of it, is for people to feel that they are allowed to put in other plants in that space. So that's the kind of services bit at the front. Then there is these green circles here. This is a black currant bush. They're planted. They grow to about 2 meters by about a meter or so, and I've put them about half a meter apart. And there is a plastic kind of fencing on the outside of it, but they'll grow and they will provide a harvest of blackcurrants. So that's the hedging around the side there. On the right hand side, there's a red dogwood, Cornus. Is it Siberica? Oh, I see it with different names. Siberica, I think the name is. And that's to provide a bit of. It's a beautiful ornamental plant, but it's a really easy to grow. Copes with damp conditions, as I'll come on to in a second. It's very, very wet there, and that's a kind of windbreak on the east side of the property. And then we have a pear tree, and surrounded by lawn. So there's a hedge. So there's the utility strip, the blackcurrant hedge, the lawn, and a tree. And underneath the tree, as I said before, thanks to Lynn, I put a massive, great big bed. And it's underplanted with a dwarf comfrey, which is a fairly substantial comfrey. It's a small comfrey. It's an Iberian comfrey, dwarf comfrey, Symphytum ibericum. Beautiful flowers. Probably needs a bit of cutting back because it can look a bit straggly. I think kind of in the summertime it kind of droops a bit and dies off a bit. But really, really beautiful plant, and can cope with wet conditions, and will help feed the pear tree, feed the fruit tree as well. So that's underplanted in a big old bed, much bigger than it actually needs to be, but I just wanted to get that bed in there and then try and involve people, get people involved and get them to plant other stuff in there as well. So that's the plan, is to get people to take advantage of these different beds. And that's it. That's just repeated across the board in each different garden. I do have a couple of other in the back garden. Sorry. There's a few climbers as well. Depending upon the situation, there is a native honeysuckle, a native ivy, but a particular cultivar of a native ivy, and there is maypops, which is Passiflora incarnata, a North American plant. It's a kind of passion fruit plant which can grow in the UK as well. Really kind of beautiful flower and edible fruit too, and that'll go on the south side. And then I have a native sweet pea, Lathyrus, native everlasting sweet pea. Beautiful plant. Was it latifolia? I think. I can't remember. Latifolia, Lathyrus latifolia. Really lovely plant, really low maintenance. Will just keep on growing and expand. Beautiful flowers. They're not scented, unfortunately, but they're pretty cool. So that is the plan, and just repeating that plan 10 times over across the whole, across each property. Now, let's go back here. I just wanted to show you the. I have to zoom on the site itself. Now, some of you, this is my friend Martin's feet, and he was just digging. They made a bit of a mess of the soil, and I think it's always a really, really good idea if you are ever going to get involved on a building site or whether it's your own building site or whether it's you're doing work for other people, do find out, talk to the groundspeople. Yep, talk to the company or the people who are doing the groundwork, because you will find out a hell of a lot more. I wish I'd done this earlier on. Go in there. The first thing you should do when you're looking at a site is take a spade and dig a hole in different places. See what the soil is like. See what the subsoil is like as well. What they've done, I didn't realise this, because of the land's on a slope. They've taken a whole load of clay. Shale, which has got so shale's like slatey kind of stuff, and the clay, and they've just leveled up about a foot or so down all around the houses. It's dried out, it's baked, and it's been compacted, and it's as hard as bloody concrete. It really is, or almost. It's just quite incredible. And then they've dumped a load of topsoil on the top, and you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that what is effectively the subsoil, which has been put in place, make sure that it is broken up before you put the topsoil on, okay? Absolutely make sure. Do not take no for an answer, because it will just save so much time and so much aggravation if you do this. Because if you don't do this, this is what happens. You get pooling. Your water will pool. There are people walking on the topsoil without putting boards down, and then it's just a bloody mess. It really is. It really, really is a mess. So what they've had to do is to put in drainage pipes, big plastic drainage pipes with holes in, covered in the weed fabric to stop them silting up, and then they put pipes in each of the back gardens where it's really bad, and that's just a load of extra work. Whereas actually, what you want it to do before putting the topsoil down, you want to break up the subsoil or whatever it is that was put down. Make sure that there is drainage in the first place. Really, 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 really got to do that. It would save so much time, effort and money. So I've had to swap the trees where it's really wet. I've had to move trees out of the way. Normally when you're planting fruit trees, you expect about 1 in 10 you expect to die. So you're expecting about 10% failure rate, but they don't live. Whereas here, I've got like 3 or 4 out of 12 trees. I think about 4 trees won't make it, but we'll see. But I'm not holding my breath. If they do die, I'm just gonna have to replace them with something that can deal with the moisture. So it's better than it was, but it's still not good. So yeah, sort out the site. So the trees, as I was saying before. What I've done with the trees is kind of really, really, it's really exciting in a kind of really simple sort of way. There's 10 properties, and each of the properties there's apple, plum, pear, and cherry trees, and the apple trees, which are the majority, they all have. There's 3 different flowering periods, so they're early, middle, and late. So that the fruit that people get they'll get a whole load of fruit, and hopefully the idea is if you get people talking to each other and sharing and gardening together, then the people will share the fruit, because they'll have too much for themselves, and they'll share the fruit amongst the rest of the houses, and then it's the next 2 trees come to fruit, the fruit ripens, and then that's shared out, and then the final 2 trees come into fruit, and that's the idea. Is that there's a kind of not a pressure, but it's natural for the food to be shared. Likewise with the hedges at the front, the food it's on display. You can see when there's loads and loads of currants ready. So hopefully people will say, oh, help yourself to black currants or chuckleberry or whatever. I'll come on to that in a second. And the other thing is, this is wood chip mulch. Normally I would use bark mulch. If you can use bark, I had to use wood chip because it's easier to bag up. That's the reason I've gone with wood chip, and I got it cheap because it's a green mix as well. It's got Leylandii in it, and I've underplanted it with dwarf comfrey, some Phytomybericum, as I said before. And I've staked it. Now this is on a St Julian. This is a plum tree, Excalibur, which is a Victoria, bred from a Victoria and something else, and a very nice tree. And it is. You don't normally stake. It's a 4 metre high by 4 metre wide tree, You don't normally stake trees that big, but because of the compacted subsoil, I've staked all the trees because I don't think the roots will be able to get in, and just to give them a little bit more support until they do. But I've staked them all. And because it's so wet, I asked a gardening friend of mine, about what else I could put in, and what willow would work well. And this is scarlet willow, which is Salix britsensis, I think it is. Yes. Oh God, it's me. Sorry. I've got the notes here on this side. So this is Salix britsensis, scarlet willow. It's quite a big tree, but this is going in all the damp patches at the back of the all the damp patches in the damp areas in the back garden mostly. And this is pollarded, which is quite a simple process. You let the main trunk grow, and then you chop it around about head height, and it kind of puts out loads and loads of branches, which are brightly coloured. So that's nice and simple to maintain, and will cope with it will cope with the conditions, and it's kind of very ornamental. But this is just to kind of fill in the gaps. I'm also using Guelder rose in certain places as well, because it will handle damp conditions, but it's a cheap hedging plant, but a very beautiful tree shrub in its own right as well. So if it does die, they're cheap to replace, and it's one of my favourite native trees. That's Guelder rose, Viburnum opulus. And what you do need is a large supply of mulch. I had. How much did I have? Must have been about 7 or 8 tons. I think it was 8 tons of mulch. And I do. This is going to be the subject of another live stream. But it's costing everything. How much does it cost to have a forest to grow a forest garden? And I think you really, if you're doing it on this kind of scale, then you do need to look at how much it costs. This is the first time I've used an online spreadsheet, Google Spreadsheets. Much as I hate Google, they're actually very, very useful for sharing information and for calculating areas. I've been using CAD, the CAD plan, to calculate an area, and then calculate how many ground cover plants and how much mulch. And this has worked out about 7 or 8 tons of mulch. So this is one of three loads that we had. But I'll come on to that in another live stream. And then the front hedging. Oh, the front hedging is absolutely brilliant. I mean, it really is totally amazing. I mean, it's simple. It's just hedging every half a metre. So what I've done is to again do a range. So we've got a range of blackcurrant. So again, this is the thing about the pricing. My friend Martin Hayes, he got me some blackcurrants. I think they're from Walcott Organic Nursery. They're beautiful, absolutely stunning. Can't remember the name, Ben something, which doesn't really help. Massive, great roots. They're vast. The roots are vast. They're about 2-3 foot high already. They cost £6 a pop, and they're brilliant. But then I had some gaps, and the only ones I could afford were from Parker's, and they're like a massive, great big mail order company, and they were £2 per plant. They're like a third the price, and I think that's these ones here, Wellington XXX. I think these ones were. So there's a whole range of different. If you can afford it, get decent ones, but they are quite pricey. But I've had to go for some cheaper ones as well. And I think it'd be so nice to have like a nursery, like an organic nursery, where you can buy them en masse for hedging. But maybe I really ought to start propagating stuff at scale here, really. Because I've got a fair degree of space, and now I've set this all up for propagation, for collecting all the plants in one place. It makes sense to use that space now. I've got a whole load of pallets out there. It really does make sense to use that space and start propagating stuff for myself and for other people. Oh, and the other plants then as well. There's black currant, there's red currant, white currant, josterberry, which is a mix of which is a very tasty mix of black currant and gooseberry. Not a straight cross, but it's quite interesting. Have a look at the Wikipedia page for josterberry and chuckleberry, which is, oh man, I can't even remember. It's interesting. It's a red currant, josterberry, black currant, I think, cross. So it's all very exciting, but it's kind of sweeter still than a josterberry. So And then I've also got honeyberry, which is like a honeysuckle bush, Lonicera. Oh, can't remember the name. Lonicera, da. Nope, can't remember it. But they're really exciting crop as well. So there's a honeyberry bush, and I've got quince as well. I think it's Japanese quince, Canamelus japonica. Yeah, and there's also a Saskatoon. Oh my goodness me, can't remember. Sorry, totally gone blank. I should have written this all down. And Aronia prunifolia, and then there's Amelanchier alnifolia as well, red chokeberry too. Just a few of them. So there's lots of variety in the hedging. So there'll be all sorts of different fruit, and I'd be so excited to see how it works, if it works out or not. Cool. So there we go. So yeah, just the ability to have, it's been such a luxury to be able to say, we'll have this one, this one, and this one, and we'll try them out and see how they grow. And because this is a long-term project, the project itself comes to an end in a few weeks, this particular phase, but I really, really want to push the community aspect of it, volunteers, working with the council, working with the housing association, and working with the private tenants, as private owners as well, that this is worth the investment and worth coming back and revisiting how well the hedges do and what needs to be changed and if things need to be replanted. So always thinking this is long term. This isn't just like, oh, plant it and forget it. You've got to keep on top of it, and you've got to keep an eye on stuff. There we go. So windbreaks, and the windbreaks, there's two. This is the west end at the top of the slope. Very, very wet, and all the water here, it's a really kind of boggy field. They took up about 15 different drainage pipes when they were preparing the site, so it gives you an idea of how much water there is. This is Formium tenax purpureum, which I think is a cultivar or something. It's New Zealand flax. Grows about 3 meters, so we'll grow up here. And 3 meters high, 3 meters high, 2 meters wide. And it's a windbreak as well, kind of slow growing, but will deal with really wet conditions, and it really is wet there. So I've underplanted that with ground ivy, which isn't very pretty in the winter, but is still quite, it's one of my favourite ground cover plants. And then on the far end, on the east side, is the red dogwood, Corlus iberica. Very, very easy to propagate, very easy to grow yourself. If you have the space, you can start propagating them straight away, and then you can plant them out next year. Underplanted with mint, native mint, which I didn't realise. I thought it was ground ivy. And along the back, this is I haven't used it before. This is the wild privet, Ligustrum vulgare, and that's just along the north side. Grows about 3 meters, semi-evergreen. And I was quite insistent about having that. It will protect the houses from, when it gets established, will protect the houses from northerly winds, and also people just looking, protect people in their garden from just the wind just howling in. So I was quite insistent about having that. I did it on a cut price. And then ground cover. Okay, so if I wanted to zoom through this. So very quickly, ground cover. This is the people that I used were for a lot of the plants. There's Celtic wildflowers. Barry, who's lovely over in Swansea, locally sourced in Welsh wildflowers. And I also used British wildflower plants. There's a chap there I've been dealing with called Matt, who's great as well. And they mixed up the ground ivy with this plant, which is Germander speedwell, which we actually, you'll find it a lot everywhere. Beautiful blue flowers, and I do use it as a ground cover here. I've been experimenting with it. I mean, I say experimenting. I've been digging it up and then replanting it into my wildflower area just to see how it does. And I got a plug plants, and there's just loads of them. And I'm thinking, it's got leaves on it, and ground ivy doesn't have a leaf in winter, but maybe it's been kept in a polytunnel or something. And then I crushed the leaf, and it didn't smell. And ground ivy leaves smell kind of like cannabis. And so I said, "Oh, this is not ground ivy." He goes, "Oh, really sorry, it's Germander speedwell. It got labelled incorrectly, but still a good ground cover." I want to experiment. I want to talk to him more about different ground covers, different native ground covers, and see how they get on. This is Rubus nepalensis, Nepalese raspberry, not a native. but a really nice ground cover to have. Takes a while to get established, like part shade, damp conditions. So I've kind of separated out a lot of it myself from the stuff from my propagation beds here. Ideally, I would be. Ideally, I'd let it grow on and get the roots established. As it is, there's going to be bare patches. I'm going to have to kind of top them up. But what I will say is that some of the plants for the plug plants, their plug plants are just tiny little, about that wide. You see that? About that wide and that deep, in big trays, and they're basically little plugs. They're cheaper than 9cm pots. The root structure can be just fantastic on them, and they're way easier to plant. And I'm just like a massive kind of wow. I'd much rather work with these than with 9cm pots. 9cm pots are big, they're heavy. You need an awful lot of them for a big area. Whereas well-grown plug plants, if you've got a lot of planting to do, they're actually pretty good. So I'm very, very impressed with them. So I'll be experimenting with that. This is oregano, wild marjoram to be precise. Oreganum vulgare. I've got it. It's really wet everywhere, and I wanted it for a sunny spot, but even the sunny spots are wet. So I've got it here, and it does all right on a wet bit. So I'm going to try it and see. It might work well, it might not. It does get quite tall though. It gets to about a meter high. So it's a good ground cover, but you can't have like any low plants within it. And then, this is something I'm very excited about. Beautiful plants, a Fragaria vesca, wild strawberry, native wild strawberry. And again, the plug plants were brilliant. And if this does well, I'm just kind of, I'll be interested to see how well it does do and how well it handles the conditions. So I've got a whole bank of that. And a green strawberry from 9cm pots. Actually much easier to propagate than the digging them up and then re-dividing them. Much easier than the Nepalese raspberry to propagate. And I've got a load of periwinkle as well, Vinca minor, which is not a native, but it's been around for a few hundred years. And then finally, community. As I was saying, really, really important, having beds everywhere. That by having large amounts of beds, which are just kind of ground cover for the hedges and for the trees, you actually say you can use these beds for perennial vegetables, because you can put a plant in, it will grow, and there you go. So that's what I want to encourage when it comes to the next stage, is to get people involved and say, right, we've got a range of different perennial vegetables. What would you like to grow? This is a good place to plant them. You have them, you plant them, you look after them if you're interested, and then encourage people to use all that space. Different fruit, as I was saying before, having a range of different fruit, a diversity of fruit, and a variety of timing, a different timing for the different apple varieties. And then finally a website. So I am creating a website for the whole lot, which will list all the plants that are used on each particular property. So it'll say these are the species, and this is the fruit, and this is when it fruits, and this is what it needs, and this is when it needs to be pruned, and then use that website. That's kind of like the kind of core information. I think the plan then is to set up a residents association, and then to use rather than using a website, which can be a bit clunky, is to use something like Telegram or WhatsApp as a way for people to communicate, and then set up a regular thing. I think this is the key, is to set up a regular, we're doing pruning, and make it like volunteers, pruning and weeding, and do it 4 times a year, and say, council, housing association, developer, fund these 4 days, but we'll get the volunteers to do it. And then when it comes to designing the forest garden and the children's play area, people will be talking to each other, will know each other, and they can have an input on how that space is designed. That is the plan. There we go. So thank you all very much for watching. I hope that's useful, and I shall see you later. Cheers, bye.